The alien world was silent except for the strange wind that moved across the red soil. 2 suns burned in the sky, one larger than the other, and their light made every shadow stretch in a strange, twisted way. The human walked slowly, careful with every step. He was far from home, far from safety, and he knew it. The land was not welcoming. The air was thick, hot, and heavy, carrying a smell that made his stomach tighten. It was smoke, but not normal smoke. It was sharp, bitter, almost like hair burning. He stopped, lifting his head. In the distance, he saw thin black lines rising into the sky, smoke curling and dancing with the wind. He narrowed his eyes. Fire, that meant life. But whose life? His instinct screamed danger. Fire meant someone was close. Fire meant people or creatures that might not welcome him. He crouched low, hiding behind a stone ridge, and listened. At first, he heard nothing, only the hiss of the hot wind. But then he caught it, a sound so faint, he thought he had imagined it. A whimper, a cry, high-pitched, weak. His heart gave a sudden hard beat. That was no machine. That was no alien storm. That was the sound of something alive, something small, something in pain. He pressed himself against the rocks and tried to steady his breathing. Every sense in his body sharpened. He moved forward, crawling, careful not to send a pebble rolling down. The smoke grew thicker the closer he came, stinging his eyes and filling his nose with that sharp, awful smell. His mouth went dry. Then the sound came again, clearer this time, a whine like a puppy calling for its mother. Another cry followed, softer, then a pitiful yelp. His chest tightened. He had grown up with dogs on Earth. That sound cut straight into him. He knew it too well. Something helpless, something afraid. His mind raced. What could it be? This was an alien world. It could be anything. But whatever it was alive. And from the smell, from the smoke, from the fire, it was close to death. He inched forward until the stone wall dropped away, giving him a narrow view of the valley below. There, by the fire, he saw them, figures, tall, reptilian shapes with thick tails dragging behind them. Their scales shone like black metal in the firelight. They stood on 2 legs, but their bodies were built like predators, strong shoulders, long arms, hands ending in claws. They laughed, a rough, hissing sound that made the human's skin crawl. But it was not the hunters that made him freeze. It was what they were doing. Above the fire hung 2 cages made of twisted iron. Inside those cages, something moved, tiny bodies pressed against the bars, fur glowing faint blue under the firelight, little shapes with 2 big eyes that shimmered like stars. Puppies, not Earth puppies, but close enough that his mind could not call them anything else. They had tails that flicked like sparks, ears that twitched in fear, and little paws that scraped at the iron bars. Their cries were the cries he had heard, helpless, terrified. His breath caught. He could not believe what he was seeing. The hunters were circling the fire, their claws tapping against blades. They carried long, curved knives. They were sharpening them, laughing as the sparks flew. And all the while, the pups cried louder, their glowing fur flickering with every sound. The human felt his stomach twist. He could taste bile in his throat. He knew what this was, a feast. They were preparing to cook the pups alive. The smell was proof. That burning hair scent, it was already happening. The cages hung low, close enough to the flames that the pups whimpered in pain whenever the fire flared. He gripped the rock so tightly that dust broke loose under his fingers. His eyes darted from the hunters to the cages. His chest rose and fell fast, too fast. He was not supposed to be here. He should have stayed hidden. He should have turned back the moment he saw the smoke. But he could not. The pups' cries were pulling him forward. Every sound was a hook in his chest, dragging him down, toward the fire. His body wanted to run. His legs trembled with the urge to bolt. But another part of him, deeper, stronger, louder, refused. He whispered under his breath, though no one could hear him. Not like this. Not while I'm here. He stayed crouched, eyes fixed on the scene. Every detail burned into his mind. The glow of the fire, the laughter of the hunters, the way the pups pressed together for comfort, tails tucked tight, ears flat. The human felt heat rise in his face. Anger, fear, helplessness, all at once. He knew the truth. Stepping out there would be suicide. One human against four massive hunters armed with blades. He would not last a second. He would lose a hand, maybe his life. And for what? For creatures he didn't even know. But his heart didn't care. His heart only heard the cries. The smoke thickened, and the wind shifted, blowing the firelight toward him. He ducked low, heart hammering. For a moment, he thought one of the hunters had seen him. The tall head turned, nostrils flaring, red eyes scanning the darkness. The human held his breath, every muscle frozen. After a long second, the hunter turned back, laughing again as one pup gave a desperate cry. The human exhaled slowly, chest aching. Sweat ran down his back. He had a choice now: stay hidden and live, or step out and risk everything. The cries rose again, filling the night like broken bells. And in that sound, he felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. And deep inside, he already knew. Under the twin suns, the fire crackled and hissed, painting long shadows across the valley floor. The human crouched lower, his chest pressed against the cold stone, his breath shallow. He had seen enough to know what waited below, but his eyes kept pulling him back, forcing him to look again. For towering shapes moved around the fire, their scaly skin catching the red and gold glow. They were not men. They were hunters, born of something far older, far crueler. Their laughter rattled through the air, sharp and cruel, like bones breaking. And above the flames, the cages swayed. Two of them, bound by twisted metal rods blackened from heat. Inside, small bodies huddled together, glowing faintly in the firelight. Not glowing from fear or fire, but glowing as though their blood carried starlight itself. Their fur shimmered pale blue, almost silver, every tiny movement sending a ripple of light over their fragile forms. Their eyes wide, too big for their little heads, burned bright like twin moons. They blinked, wet and trembling, staring out through the bars with desperate hope. The human's gut clenched. They looked like puppies, not exactly dogs, not quite Earth's faithful friends, but close enough that his mind filled the gaps. Small, innocent, trembling with life. Their tails flicked nervously, their paws pressed against the iron, their little mouths opening to release cries too soft to silence the hunter's laughter, but loud enough to shatter him inside. The hunters jeered, pointing their knives at the cages, the fire popping and spitting as they tossed bones into the flames. One reached out with a clawed hand and smacked the side of a cage, sending the pups tumbling over one another with tiny squeals. Their glow flickered brighter, as if fear itself made them shine. The reptilian creature hissed something guttural, a sound that twisted like broken metal, and the others roared with amusement. The human's heart pounded harder. He gripped the edge of the rock so tightly his knuckles ached. Every instinct screamed, leave now. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to interfere. This was not his fight, not his world. He could vanish back into the shadows, walk away, and no one would know, no one but him. But then one of the pups turned, its tiny face lifted, its eyes locking onto his hiding place as though it had known all along he was there. It pressed its glowing paw against the bars and let out a cry so faint, so fragile. It cut him deeper than any blade could. That one look, that one sound was enough. The distance between them shrank. He could almost feel its small heartbeat, echoing against his own chest. He thought of Earth, of his childhood, of a dog he once carried home through rain, its paws muddy, its ribs showing. He had fed it scraps, dried it with a towel, let it curl against him at night. That dog had looked at him with the same trust, the same silent plea. He had promised. Then never again would he turn away from a creature in need. But here he was, crouched in alien dirt. The same choice before him. The hunters shifted. One reached for a long iron pole and shoved it into the fire, pulling it out when it glowed. Red at the tip, the heat warped the air. Waves of fire dancing as the pup nearest the flames yelped and shrank back against its cage mates. Its tail curled tight, its glowing fur dimming with terror. The hunters howled with laughter, the sound echoing off the rock walls. The human bit down on his lip until he tasted blood. His hands shook. Rage was rising inside him, heavy and hot, crashing against the fear that told him he would die if he moved closer. His eyes darted from the pups to the hunters' claws, to their knives. to their powerful tails that smashed against the ground with every burst of laughter. One strike from those tails would break his ribs. One slash of those claws would tear through him like paper. And yet, he knew, he would move. He would risk it. He would not stand by. His body pressed flatter to the ground as one of the hunters sniffed the air. Its nostrils flared wide, head tilting, glowing eyes scanning. The shadows, the human froze, lungs screaming for breath he dared not take. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, louder, louder, until he thought the sound itself would betray him. The hunter's gaze swept past his hiding place, lingered for a terrible moment, then turned back to the fire. He let out the faintest breath. Relief and terror tangled together. Another cry rang out, louder this time, sharper, and it cut through his chest like glass. The pup who had looked at him before was pawing at the bars, eyes locked on him again, unblinking, pleading. It was as though it could see into his heart, as though it knew the choice already forming inside him. His fingers curled into fists. Sweat stung his eyes, mixing with the smoke, but he didn't blink. He couldn't. The flames licked higher, throwing sparks into the sky. The pups whimpered in chorus, their glow flickering like dying stars. The hunters raised their knives, their voices hissing in what sounded like a chant. The feast was moments away. The human's throat tightened. His body trembled with the weight of what he was about to do. He would have to move fast. He would have to be silent, and even then, he might lose his hand. He might lose his life. But he could no longer think about himself. His fear no longer mattered. The pups had made their choice for him, and as the fire roared and the hunters raised their blades higher, the human's muscles coiled like springs. Every nerve burned with one truth. He would not let them die here. Not like this. The human's pulse was a storm inside his chest, beating so hard it hurt. The fire below spat sparks into the night, each ember like a countdown he could not stop. The hunters circled the cages, their knives flashing, their cruel laughter rising, as if they celebrated the terror of the little ones. Smoke coiled upward, thick and choking, carrying with it that sickening smell of burning fur. He could walk away. That thought stabbed at him again, louder this time, trying to anchor him in fear. He could vanish back into the barren rocks, leave this place, and pretend he had never seen what was happening. The hunters would not chase what they did not know was here. He would live. He would keep both his hands, his blood, his breath. The universe would go on as it always had, brutal and uncaring. But then his eyes found the pups again. They pressed against the cage bars, shaking, glowing faintly as if their light was fading. One tried to lick the tears off another's muzzle, a small, tender gesture that made his throat ache. These creatures were children, innocent beyond doubt. They had no weapon, no defense, no chance. If he left, they would suffer until the fire devoured them. He had already seen too much to pretend otherwise. A single image returned to him, unbidden, like a wound opening. The dog he once saved as a boy, small and wet from the rain, pressing its fragile head into his palm as if he was the only safe place left in the world. That look had stayed with him for years. And now, here it was again in alien eyes that glowed like stars. The hunter shouted, a guttural chant that shook the air. One slammed its claw against the cage, making the pups scream and tumble over each other. The human flinched, nails biting into the dirt. His breath came to fast. His muscles burned with the need to act, even while his mind screamed about claws, blades, and death. One wrong step, and he would lose more than a hand. He pictured its scales flashing, knives cutting, his body thrown onto the fire next to the pups. He saw it so clearly his stomach churned. But then he looked again at the smallest pup, the one who kept staring at him. Its eyes did not waver, its tiny paw pressed to the bars, as though reaching for him. That silent plea drowned out everything else. The human knew. He knew before the thought even formed fully. He would not walk away. He would not let fear make him an accomplice. If he stayed hidden, he would carry the sound of their cries for the rest of his life. And that was a prison worse than any cage. He shifted his weight slowly, carefully. Stones pressed into his knees as he inched closer, silent as shadow. The heat of the fire touched his face now, a wave of searing air that made his eyes water. He did not wipe them. He could not risk the sound. his focus sharpened to a blade's edge. The world narrowed until there was nothing but the fire, the cages, and the decision already carved into his heart. A hunter turned, scanning the rocks. The human froze, body rigid. The reptilian eyes glowed in the firelight, searching, suspicious. He did not breathe. The smoke wrapped around him, and for a terrible second, he thought the wind would carry his scent. But then the hunter grunted, turned back, and raised its knife high, letting sparks rain down as the others cheered. That was the moment. The human felt it. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. His body screamed with fear, but his heart beat with something louder, resolve. This was not bravery. It was not heroism. It was necessity. He could not abandon the helpless. He would risk his hand. He would risk his life. Because if humanity meant anything in this wide, cruel galaxy, it meant this, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The pups whimpered again, their glow pulsing faintly in the smoke. The smallest one's eyes did not leave him, and he thought, almost as if hearing a voice not his own, "You are our only chance." He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his burned lips whispering words no one could hear. "I won't let you die." The hunters roared louder, knives clashing in the air, the fire blazing higher. The cages rattled as the pups thrashed in terror. The moment of slaughter was here. And yet, in the shadows just beyond the firelight, the human leaned forward, every muscle alive with desperate courage. His hand hovered inches from the edge of the rocks. The fear was still there, sharp and real. But it no longer mattered. The choice was made. He would strike. He would save them, even if the cost was his blood. The air was hotter now, thick with smoke and the sharp sting of burning metal. The fire below had grown fierce, its flames snapping high, spitting sparks into the night like angry spirits. The human's skin prickled as the heat reached him. His body screamed to stay hidden, but his mind had already crossed a line he could not step back from. The time for watching was over. The time for risk had come. He moved from the safety of the rocks, slow, measured, each step deliberate. His boots pressed into the dirt without sound. His breath stayed shallow, lips clamped tight to stop even the faintest gasp from escaping. The hunters' voices carried through the valley deep, guttural sounds, their laughter breaking through. Like shattered glass, they were distracted, circling the fire, arguing about something in their harsh tongue. The human didn't need to know the words. He knew the meaning. This was a feast. Closer. Every step was a blade against his nerves. The fire lit the edge of his face now, casting him half in glow, half in shadow. He stopped behind a jagged boulder, his back pressed to its hot surface. His heart hammered so loud he feared they would hear it. He dared a glance around the stone. The cages were just ahead, swaying gently over the fire. The pups inside whimpered, their glow weaker now, their cries desperate and thin. One of them pawed at the bars, pressing its nose against the hot metal. It yelped and pulled back, tail curling under its body. The sound cut him deeper than any knife could. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, forcing himself to stay silent. If he moved too soon, the hunters would see him. If he moved too late, the fire would finish what they had started. He waited for a chance. His eyes tracked the hunters' movements. One leaned down, shoving another bone into the fire. Another raised its knife high, letting the flames lick the blade before slamming it against a stone to sharpen. Sparks flew, showering the ground. Their attention was on their weapons, on the ritual of their cruelty. None of them looked at the cages. Not yet. This was it. The human slid forward, every muscle tight, every step a gamble. The fire's heat lashed at him, searing his skin. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes, but he didn't blink. He was close enough now to hear the pups breathing fast. Panicked, shallow, they saw him, and for a heartbeat, the cries stopped. Their glowing eyes locked on him, wide, unblinking, as if they already knew he had come for them. He reached out. His hand shook as it touched the bars. They were blistering hot, burning his skin on contact. The pain shot up his arm like lightning, but he didn't pull back. He pressed harder, testing the lock. His flesh sizzled, the smell of scorched skin rising, but still he forced himself to hold on. The lock was tight, thick, rusted into place. He pulled, twisted, but it didn't move. A sound behind him. A low growl. His chest froze. One of the hunters had stopped laughing. He could feel the weight of its stare pressing into his back. His hand clenched the lock tighter, the metal tearing his skin. He didn't dare turn around. If he met those eyes, he would lose his nerve. The lock resisted, biting into him. His teeth ground together. His jaw ached. He pulled harder, pain exploding across his hand, until his vision blurred. Still nothing. The growl grew louder. Heavy steps pounded the dirt. The hunter was moving closer. The human's mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused. He yanked with all his strength, skin tearing, blood smearing the hot bars. The metal groaned. A sound sharp as bone breaking rang out. The lock snapped. The cage door swung open. The pups tumbled forward, glowing fur brushing against his burned hand as they scrambled into his arms. He caught them against his chest, their tiny bodies shaking, their light seeping into him like a promise. Then came the roar, a deafening sound that rattled the air, shaking the ground under his feet. He turned, clutching the pups tighter, and saw them for hunters, eyes blazing red, claws outstretched, blades raised high. Their laughter was gone now, replaced by fury. Their feast had been stolen. The human's chest heaved. His burned hand throbbed, every nerve screaming, but he held the pups closer, refusing to let them go. The hunters charged, their massive bodies shaking the ground with each step. He spun, darting toward the shadows at the edge of the firelight. The heat chased him, the roar of the monsters echoing in his skull. He had them now. The pups were safe in his arms, but the hunters had seen him, and they would never stop. The night exploded into chaos. The fire roared behind him, throwing wild shadows across the rocks. But all the human heard was the thunder of heavy footsteps. The hunters were coming. Their shrieks tore through the valley, guttural and savage, shaking his bones as he clutched the glowing pups tight against his chest. The tiny creatures trembled, their fur flickering like weak flames, their cries muffled against him. His burned hand screamed in agony, skin blistered and raw, but he would not let go. He ran. The ground beneath his boots was uneven, littered with sharp stones that cut through the soles. He stumbled, caught himself, and kept moving. Every breath was fire in his lungs, every step a war against his own fear. Behind him, the hunters gained ground, their claws scraping stone, their tails smashing against the earth like whips. One of them roared so close that the sound made his ears ring. A claw swept through the air, catching the back of his shoulder. Pain ripped across his flesh, hot and wet, but he pushed forward, teeth clenched, refusing to fall. He felt blood soaking into his shirt, dripping down his arm, but the pups pressed closer to him, their tiny paws gripping his chest. Their glow lit his path, a faint, trembling light in the darkness. The hunters shrieked again. Another swipe came, so close he felt the air shift as claws missed his head by inches. His body lurched forward, adrenaline dragging him faster than he thought possible. He darted toward the jagged rocks at the edge of the valley, praying for a path, an opening, anything that could give him a chance. But the ground betrayed him. His foot caught on a stone, and he crashed hard to the dirt. The pups tumbled from his arms with tiny cries, rolling across the ground like fallen stars. He scrambled to grab them, scooping their shaking bodies back against him just as a massive shadow loomed overhead. The hunter's blade came down. He rolled, dirt grinding into his wounds, the knife striking the ground where his head had been. Sparks flew as metal bit stone. The shock rattled his bones, the sound deafening. He didn't think. He moved. He crawled, clawed at the dirt, shoved himself back onto his feet, clutching the pups once more. His chest heaved, his vision blurred, but he staggered forward again, every muscle burning. A boulder loomed ahead, split open at its base by some ancient force, a narrow crack barely wide enough for him. He dove for it. The hunters roared, their claws striking the stone just as he squeezed through. Shards rained down, stinging his skin. The crack scraped his shoulders raw, tore his shirt, but he forced himself through, pulling the pups tight to his chest so the rock wouldn't crush them. He spilled into darkness. A cave, narrow and damp, the air cool compared to the blazing heat outside. His boots skidded on wet stone as he forced himself deeper. the cries of the hunters echoing at his back. Their claws scraped against the entrance, sparks lighting the dark as they tried to tear the opening wider. The sound was a nightmare: stone screaming, monsters snarling. The pups whimpered. Pressing against his chest, he whispered to them through ragged breaths, words he didn't even know he was saying. "It's okay. Hold on. Just hold on." The hunters slammed against the rock. Dust rained from the ceiling. The cave shuddered. He kept moving, stumbling deeper into the dark, one hand against the wall to guide him. The ground sloped downward, slick and treacherous, but he didn't stop. His heart pounded so loud it drowned everything else. Then, silence. He froze, pressing his back to the wall, the pups trembling in his arms. The roars had stopped. The scraping claws were gone. For a moment, only the dripping of water echoed in the cave. He wanted to breathe relief, but his body refused. Quiet was worse than noise. Quiet meant they were waiting. He strained his ears, sweat dripping down his face, mixing with blood. Then came the sound, a low hiss, sliding through the crack like poison smoke. The hunters were not gone. They were waiting just outside, their patience colder than their rage. His burned hand throbbed, every nerve aflame. His shoulder burned where the claw had torn him open. His body felt like it was falling apart. But he tightened his grip on the pups. Their tiny eyes looked up at him, glowing faintly in the dark, trusting him with everything they had. That trust hit him harder than the pain. He slid further into the cave, boots crunching softly against the stone. The path narrowed until he had to turn sideways, pressing himself against the jagged walls, scraping his arms raw to fit through. The pups whimpered, but he hushed them gently, his voice barely a breath. Behind him, claws scraped again, louder. This time, they were widening the crack, bit by bit, stone crumbling under their strength. The human's chest heaved. He forced himself forward, desperate for the tunnel to open wider, for some path to safety. He could not fight them, not here, not now. His only chance was to run farther, deeper, until the dark swallowed him and the pups both. He staggered on, his legs weak, his wounds screaming, the sound of tearing rock following close behind. The hunters would not give up. They would chase him into the dark, into the earth itself, until they had his blood. But he had chosen, and there was no turning back. The cave breathed around him, damp and cold, but the air behind his back was alive with fury. The hunters' roars shook the stone walls, echoing so loud it felt like the entire mountain was growling. Every step he took sent pain ripping through his body, his burned hand raw, his shoulder torn, but he forced his legs to move. The pups clung to his chest, their tiny hearts racing against his skin. Their glow flickered weakly, like lanterns about to go out. He whispered to them between breaths. Broken words meant more for himself than them. "We're not done, not yet. Hold on." The tunnel twisted sharply, forcing him to stumble against wet stone. He caught himself with his good hand, wincing, as rock scraped his skin. Behind him, claws raked against the cave's entrance again, sending shards tumbling. The hunters were tearing their way inside. The sound was relentless, stone screaming as it broke under their power. He didn't have much time. He pushed forward, the tunnel narrowing until it scraped his shoulders. The pups whimpered as the walls pressed against them. He turned sideways, inching through the slit of stone, feeling the hunter's rage crash closer with every heartbeat. Their snarls filled the dark, vibrating in his chest, until it felt like the cave itself wanted him gone. Finally, the walls opened just enough for him to squeeze out into a wider chamber. His boots splashed in shallow water, cold against his ankles. The chamber stretched out, lit faintly by the pups' glow, their light bouncing off jagged stalactites, hanging like teeth. The place felt alive, ancient, dangerous, but it was shelter. For the moment, he didn't stop. He couldn't. His instinct screamed that slowing down meant death. The tunnel sloped downward again, pulling him deeper into the earth. Each step echoed, and he winced at the noise, praying the sound didn't carry. The pups pressed closer, trembling, their little claws gripping his shirt. He tried to steady them, but his own hands were shaking too much. A sudden crash echoed behind him. The hunters had broken through, the cave filled with their roars, bouncing off the stone, so it seemed like the sound came from everywhere at once. The human's chest seized, fear clawing through him. He ran, boots splashing through the shallow water, every step slamming pain through his body. The pups cried, their glow flaring brighter as if fear made them shine. The noise behind him grew louder. Heavy footsteps thundered against the stone, claws scraping, tails whipping. They were inside now, chasing him into the depths. He could feel their presence pressing against him like a storm. The cave narrowed again, the walls squeezing tight, and he ducked low to avoid jagged rock. His shoulder brushed stone, sending sparks of pain through his torn flesh, but he didn't slow. Something slammed the ground behind him. The shockwave rattled his teeth. He glanced back. One of the hunters was forcing its massive body through the tunnel, claws gouging furrows in the rock. Its eyes burned red in the dark, locked on him. Its jaws opened in a hiss that stank of blood and fire. The human stumbled, nearly falling, but forced his legs to keep moving. The pups clung to him, their cries sharp and frantic. The tunnel ahead sloped upward now, steep and slick with moss. His boots slipped, and he clawed at the rock with his good hand, dragging himself up inch by inch. The hunter's footsteps grew louder, closer, until he could feel the hot gust of their breath. A claw swiped through the dark, slicing the rock beside his head. Fragments exploded into his hair. He lunged forward, body screaming, hauling himself higher up the slope. His burned hand brushed stone, and pain flared so bright it stole his vision. He nearly let go of the pups, but he tightened his grip, holding them tighter against his chest. He would not drop them, not now. The tunnel opened suddenly, spilling him into another chamber. This one was wider, with a gaping hole in the ceiling where moonlight streamed down, pale and cold. He gasped at the sight of the sky. A way out. The hunter shrieked behind him, the sound so close it rattled his ribs. He staggered toward the beam of moonlight, his boots slipping on loose stone. The chamber was steep, almost a pit. The climb brutal. His arms burned as he pulled himself upward, jagged rock tearing at his palms. The pups whimpered, their glow casting shaky light on the walls. A massive claw slammed into the rock below him, cracking stone. The hunter was climbing too, dragging itself upward, fury twisting its scaled face. Another joined it, their roars shaking dust from the ceiling. The human hauled himself higher, breath ragged, his body breaking apart under the effort. His burned hands slipped on the rock, skin tearing, blood smearing across the stone. He grit his teeth, forcing his body upward with everything he had left. The opening was just ahead. Moonlight bathed his face, cold and clean. He lunged for it, pulling himself through the gap, his chest scraping the edge of the rock. The pups cried out, their glow flaring bright. For a heartbeat, he thought he wouldn't make it. The claws were too close. The hunters roared aloud. But then his body spilled out into the night air, collapsing on rough grass under the open sky. He gasped, every breath tearing his lungs. The pups pressed against him, safe for the moment. Behind him, the hunters slammed against the opening, their claws gouging the rock, their roars shaking the night. But the gap was too small for their massive bodies to follow. They were trapped below, their rage echoing into the darkness of the cave. The human lay there, trembling, his body broken and bleeding, but alive. The pups climbed onto his chest, their glow soft now, warm against him. Their tiny eyes blinked up at him, filled with something that felt like trust. He closed his eyes, the sound of the hunters fading into the distance. For tonight, he had escaped, but deep inside, he knew this was not the end. The grass beneath him was damp, carrying the smell of soil and night, but all the human could feel was pain. His body screamed in a dozen places. His burned hand throbbed like fire. His shoulder was a raw wound. His lungs ached from the run, but he was alive. More important, the small lives pressed against him were alive too. The pups clung to his chest, their glowing fur warm against his battered body. Their tiny breaths tickled his skin, uneven at first, then slowly calming, as if they understood that for now they were safe. He tilted his head, staring at the sky above. Twin moons hung there, pale and silent, their light silvering the blades of grass around him. For the first time since he had smelled the smoke, there was stillness. No roars, no claws, no snapping flames, only the quiet night and the sound of his own ragged breathing. But peace was fragile. He knew the hunters had not given up. Their roars still echoed faintly from the cave behind him, fury bound by stone, but not destroyed. They would search, they would follow, and they would remember. He had stolen their feast. He had marked himself as their enemy, and enemies, in this cruel galaxy, were hunted until the end. The pup stirred, curling closer. One nudged his chin. With its nose, glowing eyes wide and trusting, another licked at his burned hand, its tiny tongue brushing the blistered skin. He hissed at the sting, but the sound turned into a laugh, weak, broken, but real. They were so small, so fragile, yet they carried a light that had pulled him through fire and blood. He thought of the choice he had made, the madness of it. He had risked everything, his body, his life, his chance of ever returning home for creatures he had not even known existed an hour ago. And yet, as their warmth spread through him, he realized he had not hesitated, not truly. The moment their eyes had met his, the decision had been carved into him, or still, the question pressed at him now, heavier than the pain in his body. Had it been foolish? He was one man, alone, unarmed, stranded on a hostile world. The hunters would not forget, and when they came again, they would not make the mistake of underestimating him. He had brought their rage upon himself. And for what? For glowing pups whose names he did not know, whose kind he had never seen before. His burned hand trembled as he lifted it, brushing gently over their fur. Their glow brightened under his touch, faint sparks dancing between them like stars caught in a storm. Their tiny hearts beat fast but steady, each pulse a reminder that they lived because of him. He closed his eyes, listening, and in that rhythm he found an answer. It wasn't about logic. It wasn't about survival. It was about something older, something he had carried since Earth. Humanity was not claws or teeth or fire. Humanity was the refusal to let the helpless be devoured. Humanity was standing in front of the flame and saying, "Not today," even if it hurt, even if it killed. The night pressed in around him, cool and quiet. He shifted, sitting up with a groan, his body protesting every movement. The pups climbed onto his lap, curling together in a glowing bundle. Their eyes never left him, watching, waiting, as if they knew he carried their fate now. He felt the weight of that trust, heavy as any weapon, sharp as any blade. He had saved them, but saving was only the first step. What came next was survival. In the distance, an owl-like cry rose into the night, alien and strange. The wind carried the scent of damp earth mixed with the faint trace of smoke. He shivered. The hunters would come again, maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He could not stay here. He would need shelter, food, water, not just for himself, but for them. The thought should have crushed him, but instead, it steadied him, a purpose, a reason to rise, even when his body wanted to collapse into the grass forever. He looked at the pups again. They blinked back at him, their glow soft, their tiny bodies pressed together for warmth. In their eyes, he didn't see fear anymore. He saw trust. He saw hope. And in that reflection, he felt a truth settle deep inside him. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe it was suicide. But maybe, just maybe, it was the only thing that kept him human. In a universe that had forgotten what mercy was, he leaned back against the stone, the stars above him spinning in the sky. His breath slowed, his wounds pulsed, and his heart beat steady against the fragile bodies curled on his chest. The hunters would come. Death might follow. But tonight, under the moons, in the glow of the little ones he had saved, there was a moment of quiet victory, and in that silence, a question lingered, sharp and unshakable. Had he risked everything for nothing, or had he just found the one thing worth losing everything for?